So in the previous video, we created a new Symfony 4 application and we added a simple health check endpoint to ensure that Behat can talk to our API. The next step is to ensure that Behat can post data into our API. And this is important as this is how we'll set up the background or the expected state of our application whilst in the test environment. So we can look inside the album feature to take a look at how a post request is expected to be handled. We know that we expect the request body to be in this sort of shape. There's a bunch of things that we need to do to handle requests like this. The first of which is that we're going to need a new controller. We're going to use the Symfony Maker bundle to generate ourselves a controller class. Again, this has created us our album controller, but it's also created us our album index html.twig. We don't need this, so feel free to delete it. Now, out of the box, Symfony doesn't play super nicely with JSON. The FOSREST bundle library is often used to make working with JSON data inside a Symfony application feel a little bit more natural. Likewise, the API platform puts JSON, or primarily JSON LD, or linked data, front and central. So we're going to cover both of those implementations shortly, but for now we're going down the manual route. So inside the album controller, I'm going to make the following changes. I'm going to set our controller to extend abstract controller, and there's a link on this in the show notes where I've been into more detail on why I do that. I'm going to name the root to be post album, and I'm going to change the controller method name from index to post. Now note that I don't need to call this post action. If you're coming from Symfony 2 or Symfony 3, this may seem unusual to you, but our controllers are now services by default, so we don't need the action suffix. Also, if coming from Symfony 2 or Symfony 3, note that we're in the app namespace rather than the app bundle namespace. I'm going to get rid of that entire return statement. I'm going to replace it with a return, a new JSON response, and I'm just going to return the status, just a bit of text, and I'm also going to use the JSON response object, which would be super nice if it would import for me. There we go. And then from here, there are some predefined constants where I can say this was a HTTP created or a 201 status code. So at this point, it would be worthwhile taking a look at the available routes in our application with the bin console debug router. And there's ours right at the very top. So the first thing that I'd do is I would test this route manually. And in order to do this, we need some data to send in. So we've got our album feature and we know exactly what kind of data we want to send in. So I've just taken a copy of that request body there, and I'm going to go and send in my request to HTTP 127.0.0.1 port 8000 on /album. I'm going to change it to a post request. As we'll see in a sec, this doesn't actually matter. I want to set it to raw, and I also want it to be JSON. So I'm going to paste in the body there. I'm going to send that in. We can see that we get back our 201 created with a status of OK. But this is actually nonsense because all we're doing is returning this JSON response with a status of OK and a 201 created, but we're not actually creating anything. It doesn't even matter if this is a GET request or a POST request or anything. So we could change this off to be a GET request and we still get back our 201. Likewise, we could send in a delete or a patch or a put or whatever, it doesn't matter. So let's immediately restrict this down to be only allowing method of type POST. So just say the methods is only POST. Now we can check the router and make sure that this time we only allow post requests in. So the method is now post, whereas before it was any. And this now restricts us down to only being able to send in a post request. So if we send in our get, we should get back a 405 that the method is not allowed. You can see method not allowed, but we do allow post. So if we set post, send that in, then good, we're getting back our 201 created. However, as we've just said, this is a bit of nonsense really at the moment. We're not actually creating anything. So in order to get access to that incoming request data, we're going to need access to the request, which Symfony models for us as the request object. Now we can get access to that simply by injecting it into our controller action. Rather bizarrely, PHP Storm is just not picking this up for me today. Anyway, it's an object of type Symfony component HTTP Foundation request. And once we've got that, we need to get the content from the request. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a new local variable, which I'm just going to call data. And I'm going to run a JSON decode against request get content, which is just going to be that raw string, that raw JSON data that we're posting in. And I'm going to pass in the second argument here as true. And what that's going to do is, as you can see, it's nicely popped up for us. It's going to turn this into an associative array. In other words, a PHP array where those keys and values match up with what we've just posted in as JSON. And in order to validate what's inside that data variable at this point, I'm just going to doctrine debug dump and die and then send this in. And we can see that associative array mapping one-to-one with what we sent in as JSON. Now don't worry that it prints twice. Seems to be a quirk, little helper function that I like to use. So at this point we have a working controller class that has a post method that can handle our incoming post requests. And by restricting this down to just post requests, we can guarantee that we won't use this code in any other situations such as get, import and patch and so on. We can send in raw JSON data just like we'll receive from our front-end clients. It can be JavaScript or any other front-end implementation. And we can turn this into a format that PHP can happily work with. In other words, our associative array. There's still a bunch of issues to address. We need a way to tidy up this submission, and we need a way to get this data into our database. For this, we're going to use Symfony's form and also doctrine respectively. So let's get onto that in the very next video.